All right, welcome to another fantasy clinic on talkSPORT End Zone. I'm Jay Lawrence, as per, joined by Adam Rank. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for the coming week. The Bears are back playing football again. It was a weird week, and the best part of it is the Bears were flexed because this game was going to run concurrently with Arsenal and that other side. And now I'll be able to watch both games separately and not be stressing out over two games at once. So it'll be a good day.
I enjoyed watching the Chicago Bears in person the other week.
How was it? How was that experience for you?
It was good. There were a lot of Bears fans in London. And I'm not just talking about the ones that, are British. There were a lot of American Bears fans that decided to come over. That whole stadium was a Bears home game. And actually, I think that's credit to the Bears, really, because last year it was the same with the Bills. It was like a sea of purple. And this time it was just all Chicago Bears fans. I had a couple friends of mine that decided to wear their Packers gear.
Oh, no.
Didn't go well.
Don't do that.
Didn't go well.
No reason to do that.
Didn't go well whatsoever. Actually, we've got loads to talk about today, actually, Rank. All fantasy, lots of NFL-related stuff. But it's all intertwined, isn't it? It's all intertwined.
100%.
Let's start with the breaking news over the past few hours of DeAndre Hopkins being traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I am assuming... It's been a weird one, really, because you would assume if you take a step back, or maybe you haven't followed the NFL as closely over the last couple of years, oh, yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs, every player is going to be amazing at fantasy. Everyone's going to be, and it's not been that, really, has it?
Yeah.
But, yeah, they're still unbeaten. They're still a good team. What does this mean to the Kansas City Chiefs, Hopkins, and everyone that surrounds him?
Well, it's interesting because for years the Chiefs would go out there and they were content to win these games that were, 41-38. You're going to outlast and outscore all these other teams. But over the last couple of seasons, as they've gotten into their dynasty mode, they're just outwilling people. And it's similar to what the New England Patriots did for the longest time. Outside of that brief stretch where they had Randy Moss, they just wore teams down with their defense, ran the ball pretty well, had some receivers who had nice career, like nice numbers, but not like, they weren't leading the league like Jamar Chase or somebody like that. And I think that when you look at this Chiefs team now, DeAndre Hopkins comes in and is actually a really good complement to what they're trying to accomplish with the Kansas City Chiefs. They have their speed guy. They got Xavier Worthy. They've got players that stretch the field. They needed that possession receiver, which is why they brought back Juju Smith-Schuster, because during his time with the Chiefs, he actually filled that role pretty well. And he was a decent enough fantasy wide receiver. He wasn't like somebody who was winning you your championship, but he was solid. Like, he's gotten out there and giving you pretty good production. And that's what we expect out of DeAndre Hopkins. He'll go out there and put out some nice production. He'll be somebody who moves the sticks. If you're playing in a league that rewards points per reception, even half point per reception, this is going to be a pretty decent get. And the funny thing is whenever you see news breaking in the middle of the day over where you are, understand how early it was for me on the West Coast. I truly believe it was 4 a.m. I woke up this morning to DeAndre Hopkins already being traded. DeAndre Hopkins already claimed in every single one of my fantasy leagues. People do not play around. They moved quickly. But I don't think it's going to be, it's not going to be Tyreek Hill. But think about what Juju did a couple of seasons ago. It'll be similar type production. Somebody obviously worth rostering. And what's really interesting is, like, what does this do for Patrick Mahomes? Because it's gotten to the point where people are asking me questions like, do I start Drake May or Patrick Mahomes? And I'm like, okay, yeah. And it's a legitimate question. This makes it a little bit better, but still, like, it's not going to be prolific. Like, Patrick Mahomes is now a low-end, high-end quarterback 2, low-end quarterback 1. And in a week where we don't have anybody on a bye, Patrick Mahomes might not be started in a lot of places. Now, if somebody had Jaden Daniels who've been playing, he's very doubtful for this coming week. There might be opportunities to play Patrick Mahomes, but we do this every week on the Thursday edition of NFL Fantasy Live, the Patrick Mahomes line. Who are the guys just above him and who are the guys just below him? I'm starting to put that together. And even with DeAndre Hopkins, it's not moving that much one way or the other, although it is trending up a little bit.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns this season for Patrick Mahomes, which is not going to do much for your fantasy lineup. I know you're speaking a little bit about him there. Are you just saying now, just stick with him? Stick with him. Don't consider putting anyone else in.
I mean,
see how it goes.
What have you been doing? Who have you been starting over? Well, what is your quarterback situation? Because it's realistically, like a lot of people have been starting Geno Smith over Patrick Mahomes. People have been starting Baker Mayfield over Patrick Mahomes. I would continue with those guys. Baker being the most interesting because we don't know how this offense is going to look like in Tampa Bay without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans for the foreseeable future. But I think like where you've had Patrick Mahomes is like if you've been starting him, and for some people, they're in 2 quarterback leagues, they're in leagues, 14-team leagues, 16-team leagues. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes still sort of rates there. But yeah, this wasn't enough to push him over guys like even Jared Goff. Yeah, Jared Goff. I think that's usually a decision people have. And at some point, you might just want to settle on your guy and be like, you know what? Don't go through this every week. If you have Geno Smith, I think you're now fine to just always be starting Geno Smith. So I think that your quarterback situation is probably remaining the same. And again, especially this week with no teams on a bye, there's probably not a lot of opportunity to start Patrick Mahomes. Although he will be better, it's not really putting a lot of juice out there, so to speak.
Well, I think there'll be a lot of people that drafted Travis Kelce quite high as well and might be disappointed with how he's done fantasy-wise this season. Probably not so much, he's probably a type of player that maybe due to his position, you probably aren't trying to find a different tight end to start in front of Travis Kelce. Does this affect him at all?
I hope it opens it up for him. I think it's better for Travis Kelce when there are other people out there for defenders and defensive coordinators to focus in on. And that's what I'm hoping for. And I still, again, like I'm not getting off Travis Kelce. I'm sorry if you drafted him in the 2nd round or anything like that, but Travis Kelce still needs to be started. And I think that the reason why you would do that is if you look at precedent, if you look at Mark Andrews, where everybody was ready to give up on Mark Andrews after week 1 and Isaiah Likely went out there and scored, 90 fantasy points in a game? Like it was incredible. Mark Andrews over the last 3 weeks has scored at least 9.5 points in PPR formats. He's scored 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games, and he's rewarded everybody who is stuck with him over that time by like, okay, then finally, this is Mark Andrews. This is what we're expecting. I would expect something similar to happen with Travis Kelce, and this week he's going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that he has traditionally done very well against. So you should have a little bit of hope. And I always ask people too, like, what is your alternative? Like, who are you starting? Like, if somehow, and I'm trying, like, if you somehow ended up with Kyle Tucker, Cole Kmet, okay, those are 2 options where like, okay, that's reasonable to start those guys over Travis Kelce. But what you typically are doing is trying to find somebody like Noah Fant or Jonnu Smith. And Jonnu Smith scored a touchdown last week. So it does happen. But those are always more like lottery tickets. Like, hey, you're hoping for the best. You're hoping to strike lightning in a bottle. Or capture lightning in a bottle, I should say. So for me, at least Travis Kelce's on a historically good offense with a historically good quarterback that you hope will get some opportunities because the tight end position is so dire. There's not a lot of hope with it anyways. And instead of streaming a guy, I would rather go with Travis Kelce. It's interesting because I need to start doing this with Kelce too, because I think Kmet this week against the Commanders, like I would go with Kmet. Tucker, I think I'd probably go with Tucker. David Njoku is probably one of the more interesting names at the tight end position this week. Might still be available in some of your leagues. I think with the change to Jameis Winston, I think he caught a touchdown from Jameis Winston last week. Or I don't know if that was DTR, but yeah, when you look at David Njoku, he's started to come on over the last couple of weeks that if you give these tight ends a little bit of time, even Cole Kmet took some time to get started this season. So I think that Travis Kelce, I know it's frustrating to put him out. Sam Laporta is going through the same instance too. Like, oh, what are we doing with Sam Laporta? Are we still, but is this, I think funny enough, I think Sam Laporta is probably safer, believe it or not, even though he has not been a huge factor at all. You know, when you look at Sam Laporta now, number one, there are reports, the NFL is not reporting this, But there are other people who are reporting that Jameson Williams could end up missing some time. I won't speak to those reports or anything like that. But I think the Lions, and this is credit to Ben Johnson, we haven't seen a lot of Sam Laporta yet because we haven't needed to see a lot of Sam Laporta yet. It's kind of like what happened last season with Jahmyr Gibbs. And people drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, and they were frustrated for 10 weeks, and you were just like, you know what, hold the line. Wait it out. See what happens, and eventually Jahmyr Gibbs gets unlocked. I truly believe at some point this season, these defensive coordinators are going to believe that they have the Lions figured out, and then Ben Johnson's going to be like, yeah, no, you don't. We're going to Sam Laporta now. And Sam Laporta is going to probably catch fire towards the end of the season and finish very strong. So I feel great about him. Travis Kelce has that. I'm less, if I had to pick one of the two guys, I would rather have Sam Laporta over Travis Kelce. But I think Travis Kelce could be in a very similar situation.
Do you think it's funny that, does it feel like 2017 fantasy when we're talking about Kareem Hunt, Hopkins and Kelce? It feels like, no, they're relevant. It's like, oh, it's 2017 all over again.
It's a reboot already. Yeah, we're rebooting. Like usually the reboots come.
It's a new Spider-Man.
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's like, hey, Sony owns the rights to the Chiefs, and they've got to make new versions of the offense, but we're bringing the old guys back. Yeah, it's called Kansas City Chiefs Homecoming.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Very good, Rag. Let's speak about a couple other signings as well, a couple other trades. I know that he scored a touchdown last week for the Buffalo Bills and Amari Cooper. Obviously it was kind of like a whirlwind for him, really, the trade, and he didn't even know really what he was running. I mean, you can see that obviously him having conversations.
Ian Coleman was telling him.
Yeah, exactly.
Showing him the plays on his leg.
I love it. So, but for me, it seems like if you have Amari Cooper, or I doubt that he's going to be available in many leagues or any leagues, to be honest with you. But if you have Amari Cooper, is he a must start with Josh Allen under center?
I don't think you question it at all. Like, this is one that he starts every week, unless you're absolutely loaded at the wide receiver position. If you somehow play in a league where you start just two receivers and your other two starting receivers are Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson, yeah, okay, like maybe you don't start Amari Cooper. But I loved everything about this. And I've actually had the opportunity to speak with Amari Cooper before, and he's a nice person, but he's very quiet. Like, he's just a quiet person. Yeah, okay, he's quiet. Like, no big deal. You know, it happens. Not everybody's going to be as outspoken as us, Jay. But I had a pleasant enough time with him. And so when I heard him talking about Josh Allen, it's like, who is this person? Like, I've never heard him speak so much. I think even Nick Saban made a joke about, like, I've never heard Amari Cooper talk so much ever. And the way he was raving about Josh Allen, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And the fact that, and he was able to, and it's so fun because Cleveland and Buffalo are pretty close. Like, you just drive around the lake and you're there. And I'm like, this is going to end up being really good. And I'm very excited for Amari Cooper. I'll be honest with you, too. When he played for the Raiders, I had noticed some things back in the day where I'm like, there's something, he drops the ball, does this, does that. And I doubted the Cowboys when they traded for him. And I think I had a tweet that was like, it went super viral as a great joke. And then I was like, I was completely wrong. Like, I totally missed. Like, he was excellent for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think Dak Prescott, when he signed his huge contract, I think he should have probably tipped out Amari Cooper, because part of the reason you got here was Amari Cooper was so good for you. And while it never really worked out in Cleveland, and honestly, like, I think that if Amari Cooper would have been able to play with Jameis Winston, it would be the same thing. But at the same time, I think going to Buffalo is the best possible scenario for him. I know the Bills God bless them for giving it a go. They had to get rid of Stephon Diggs, and they're like, you know what? We got Dalton Kincaid, we got Keon Coleman, we got Khalil Shakir. It's like, nah, you need an alpha. And that's exactly what Amari Cooper is. So he absolutely has to play. And then in Cleveland, I know a lot of people will look at Jerry Jeudy, but if you watch the game, Cedric Tillman ended up being the guy. So if you're sitting there with a hole in your roster and you're like, God, you had Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, one of the receivers who went down, go take a peek, see if Cedric Tillman's available. Because I truly believe that Cedric Tillman could be one of those players this season, especially with Jameis. And I don't want to take too much delight in Jameis the reason why Jameis got his opportunity. But Jameis is a former 5,000-yard passer in this league. He's thrown for 30 touchdowns in a season. Like, he is a good quarterback. And I think that Cedric Tillman could end up being one of those guys that we look back on, be like, hey, here are the players who are on most championship rosters. I think Cedric Tillman has that type of ability.
Well, let's just speak about Jameis Winston quickly, because I know we spoke about a few quarterbacks earlier on, but Jameis Winston is if there was a book called Boom or Bust, it'd be Jameis Winston's face on the front of it, especially when it comes to fantasy, I suppose. This is a guy that, if you are struggling for a quarterback, he could be a game winner for you, couldn't he?
You know what? I'm glad you brought this up, because now I'm gonna really sit down and think about this. So I apologize to everybody in advance. Like, talking about the guys you start over Patrick Mahomes, does Jameis Winston fit in that category? And at first blush, I'm like, yeah, kind of. I can't help thinking about what happened last season with Joe Flacco. And I think Joe Flacco is a good quarterback. I really do. I really believe that Joe Flacco has been underrated for the majority of his career, not given enough credit. I think he should get more the team that had him, and I know everybody looks like, oh, the Browns shouldn't have let him go. I'm like, no. A couple of years ago, he was on the Jets. He was the Jets' backup quarterback. If Joe Flacco had been the Jets' quarterback over the last 2 years, I'm sick for Jets fans to even think about it. Nobody talks about this enough. And
I think you're sick for Jets fans for multiple reasons, to be honest.
For a lot of reasons, absolutely. But when I think about Kevin Stefanski, I think the one thing that he's shown is that he is a great coach, and his system will work with most quarterbacks. The only quarterback it seemingly didn't work with was the one you traded 3 first-round picks for and spent $270 million on. The only quarterback that couldn't work for. Because even Baker Mayfield, if Baker Mayfield would have stuck around, like, see what he's doing in Tampa Bay, he'd be doing that stuff in Cleveland. I have no doubt about that. We saw what Joe Flacco did last year. Now I'm very anxious to see what happens with Jameis Winston, because Jameis is one of those quarterbacks that I feel, again, was not put into a great situation. He, thrust into the fire from early on. And this happens to so many quarterbacks who never get a true opportunity, or it's jaded. Like, not everybody gets to walk into a situation where you get to sit for a couple years, learn behind a Hall of Famer, and then you go out there and you play and you're like, oh, all of a sudden it's great. Jameis never had that, but this now might be his time. And I'm excited about it. And like you said, Jay, if I need a quarterback and I'm in a position, if I lost Jaden Daniels, Jameis Winston is the guy that I would who's available on the waiver wire, I'd put him over Russell Wilson. I would put him over. Bo Nix is interesting because Bo Nix brings the running ability. And Bo Nix last week had 14 fantasy points against the Saints, which at the time, like, until the Monday night games, like, he was still like quarterback 12 with 14 points, like, which is just a sad commentary on what we're getting out of quarterbacks right now. But Jameis is up there. Jameis, Wilson, and Bo Nix. I mean, if we're looking at it, I know that Russell has the Giants. That could be different. I think Jameis is the guy that I'd want to stream this. Oh, you know what? No, I take that back. Bo Nix because he's got the Carolina Panthers. Why am I?
So at risk of trying to create a clickbaity YouTube title, would you start Jameis Winston over Patrick Mahomes?
You know what? Let's create a clickbaity YouTube title. We're starting Jameis. It's not outlandish to think of it.
It's not outlandish. It's not. And that's not saying would you have Jameis Winston as your quarterback for your team. That's a very different
We're not
question.
saying like that. And
to be clear, clickbait title.
Now let's get the clickbait. Yeah, we're starting Jameis Winston, Bo Nix over Patrick Mahomes. That's good, because I'll do that. I'll likewise do the same thing.
Okay.
We'll put it out on Instagram.
I inspired you with this terrible take.
Collab. No, this is great. This is like a production meeting for me. But this is good. Like this is why I like doing shows like this, and why I've really had a great time with you over the last couple of weeks, because I like talking through these things. Because like I said, at first blush, like, I don't know, like, I want to sit down and think about it a little bit more. But as we're talking through it, like, you're like, yeah, you know what? Like, yeah, Jameis, like Kevin Stefanski, they want to throw the football. Their defense has not been as great as it's been. I think that's one of the reasons that's really hurt the Chiefs as much this season, is that their defense is so good. And we've really never seen Patrick Mahomes put into a situation where it's like, I got to throw the ball a ton to get us back into these games. That was one of the reasons why Jared Goff was good last week, is that they fell behind to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Minnesota Vikings coming into that game had allowed one rushing touchdown. Funny enough, Jahmyr Gibbs runs for 2, but they were in a situation where you're like, you know what, they got to throw the ball. And so the Chiefs never get into that spot. Cleveland will be in that spot. Denver, it's dicey, but I think that Bo Nix's running ability gives you a benefit right there. And when you get an opportunity to just destroy a team, which I think Sean Payton wants to do and develop a quarterback, I think Bo Nix will get his chances. So I feel good about that. I think listen, the Chiefs should smoke the Raiders. Like, I know a lot of people will say, well, how do you end up smoking the Raiders? You know, get up by 21 points against them. And you're like, yeah, but that's going to be Kareem Hunt scoring a pair of touchdowns again. Like, that's going to be the kind of thing that happens. So, yeah, this might not be another great statistical week for Patrick Mahomes, for a team that should win easily.
Let's talk about another wide receiver that was traded. This was I think it was over a week ago now. I mean, he did play at the weekend. Devontae Adams with the New York Jets. Now, that happens, and you immediately think, okay, well, he's going to be in a better fantasy position. My question to you is he in a better fantasy position?
Yeah, I mean, like, as much as we disregard Aaron Rodgers and what he's done over the last couple of years and what's going on with him, and is he a good leader, blah, I don't know. It's a better situation than what he was in Oakland. And Devontae Adams got 10 targets on Monday night against a pretty good Steelers team. So you look at that, you're like, okay, he's getting targeted a lot. He's going to be involved. It's going to work out. This is one of those things for the haters like myself to sit here and take great delight in, that Devontae Adams wasn't able to do what we expected him to do. And it's going to take a little bit of time. Even though he has the chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, it's still been a couple of years. This is going to be the week that it takes off. And this is going to be the week where a lot of people give up on it, because fantasy managers they're always chasing last week's points. Like, oh, well, this guy scored 20 points against the Panthers, I'm going to play him again. And you're like, oh, it's different now that they're playing the Jets or whomever. Similarly, when a guy has a bad game, they get off of him way too quick. Case in point. So obviously Devontae Adams will be better. Another guy too, I'm just throwing names out now. Jay, I'm getting crazy. Tank Dell, well, it just makes me understand too, like, Tank Dell is also in this same situation. Tank Dell scored 0 points. I was looking in a league. I was going through, checking out my scores. I looked at a league and I'm like, oh my God, did I accidentally keep Nico Collins in my lineup? I'm like, oh, no, it's just Tank Dell. Okay. Both him and Nico gave the same amount of points. So everybody's like, there's no way I'll play Tank. I'm like, okay, Tank Dell is a good player. He's going to turn it around. This week they're playing the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, he's going to be fine. Anybody, like, people, and this will be the thing, people will complain. They'll send in the woulda, coulda, shoulda tweets, be like, oh, I can't believe I benched Tank Dell this week. It's like, because you were too worried about what happened last week.
Well, how many weeks of let's say low scores do you, and I know you need to take into consideration matchup and situation, blah, 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 but is there like a blanket number of weeks that when there are low scores that you start to think, okay, I need to drop this guy? Where
the trend is like, he's not producing. Like the Quentin Johnston, where you're like, yeah, this guy might not be good. Well, Tank Dell 2 weeks ago caught a touchdown, had a pretty nice fantasy performance. I think he had 15 points 2 weeks ago in a game against, it wasn't the Packers, but it was a game where it was the first week that Nico Collins missed. And everybody's like, don't necessarily think that he's going to go out there. He hasn't looked great. Watch the tape. You're like, I get all that, but he's going to get opportunity. So you put a little faith in him and you were rewarded. And so then you roll it in again. Like, I know the Packers have a good defense, but you're like, he got an end zone target. Like, that's the thing that people kind of skip. Like, it's not like he's being legislated out of the games. It's not like CJ Stroud is ignoring him. He just dropped a touchdown, which would have been very helpful. Not too much. It would have given us like 9 yards, so 7.9 points, but whatever. Like, that, better than 0. He's getting targeted in the end zone, and he's getting targeted with opportunities. And we do these things, we go through these exercises about panic or patience. I really need to see one bad week where, let's say he doesn't play well against the Indianapolis Colts. That would be cause for concern. You're like, okay, like there might be some substance to this, and we might need to start looking at some other players. When they do not play well in a matchup that's not as favorable, like, okay, like you can write it off. Like this week, we have a defense like this, let's say like the Bears, for instance. Like if Terry McLaurin doesn't have a good week, you can kind of be like, Jalen Johnson, they've got a good defense. That makes sense. So it's when it goes on for a couple of weeks and then you blow your good matchup, that's where I think people take issue. And that's where you got to be like, okay, maybe we take a step back and assess, see where we can kind of bring in some other players or start some other guys. But I want to see it for at least consecutive weeks before I get too out of control with it.
I feel like this is a wide receiver special today, and I feel like it's all trade talk, really, but it's all relevant, it's all good. Somebody that you haven't had to consider for a few weeks is Cooper Kupp, obviously, as he's been injured for the Los Angeles Rams. Now, there will be people out there, I think even I might be, yes, I am one of them in one of my leagues, actually, who has Cooper Kupp. This has sort of been stashing him on IR, just waiting for that glorious return to the LA Rams. But now it looks like he might be shopped. Now, that may be the case. It might not be the case. When you are a fantasy manager in this position, do you think the best thing to do is try and sell now? Or is it just a case of waiting and just seeing what happens? It's difficult as well because he's injured. Yeah,
he's injured, and one of the reasons the deal wasn't able to be made with the Kansas City Chiefs is that he has something, forgive me if I don't have the exact numbers, but somewhere around a $30 million cap hit, which made it too impossible. And I know the NFL salary cap is sort of a myth anyways, but it was too much money for the Kansas City Chiefs, and they were getting DeAndre Hopkins for basically free. So it might be very difficult for him to be moved because of those extenuating circumstances. And you've got to look at the teams that need a wide receiver. Somebody like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you got to look at like how much it's going to cost you as far as money and capital. And you have to ask yourself the tough question of, is this truly making us a better team? Is this something like, are we now Super Bowl contenders with Cooper Kupp, or are we just divisional contenders? And similarly, I think that fantasy managers also go through the same sort of thought process when you are either trying to acquire or deal away Cooper Kupp. For a lot of us, you've had to play without Cooper Kupp for quite some time. How is your roster managing? If you're one of those players who is 5-2, 4-3, or even 3-4, and you've had Cooper Kupp on the bench or the IR spot or whatever it is, and you're like, you know what? I've been able to kind of maintain with this. Why not keep him? And and similarly, like some people might need a desperation heave and be like, God, I need to make up something. I need to get my team back into the thing. But a lot of people don't want to give up a lot for Cooper Kupp because he's not been available because of the injuries. And that might lead them to be like, I don't want to trade for a guy who's been inconsistent, who's battled injuries not only this season.
So you're not going to get much, essentially. So it's almost like,
might as well keep
why bother? Why bother? Why keep him? You do mention the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, actually, and we'll finish on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because Mike Evans gone out, Godwin out as well for this season. Is there anybody worth? And I mean, I know that we spoke about the need for them needing, wide receivers at the moment, but is there anybody there that you might think, well, they're going to get more targets now for Baker Mayfield, who does like and enjoy throwing the ball? Is there anybody that you might consider picking up?
Jalen McMillan is one that I think the rookie out of Washington who played with Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk. That seems like one that you're like, okay, that's makes a lot of sense. We thought perhaps this season he could come in and make an impact. But I think one of the reasons that was going to help him was that he was going to be playing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So for me, I'm looking at Sterling Shepard, who played with Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. So I think as everybody was spending all their fab money or their waiver priority or anything like that on Jalen McMillan, I've just kind of been sauntering in, picking up Sterling Shepard and be like, you know what? I'm going to give this a go. I think this could end up being the guy. I think he has the chemistry already with Baker Mayfield, and when Baker Mayfield needs to make a big play, this is going to be the player that he's looking for. So for me, I'd be picking up Sterling Shepard.
And finally, Rank, do you have any message for somebody that is, and I'm not talking about me, I promise, anybody that is doing appallingly in their league and might need a little bit of motivation to carry on?
You know what? At some point, we're getting to a crossroads where it might not be in the cards for us, but we don't want our friends to experience joy either. So let's go out and beat them. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep somebody else from making the playoffs. And even then, we've talked about this for weeks. Even if you have one win, how many wins does the sixth place team have? Like, how many wins do we really need to string together? It's not as many as you think. Keep going out there. Keep setting your lineups. Keep doing what you're doing. Try to be as mindful as possible. Now, I'm not a smart person. I do my football practice, and by football, I mean the beautiful game. I do that on Thursday nights when the NFL plays, and I have to be very mindful if Cooper Kupp's playing, because I got Cooper Kupp in so many spots. So I'm going to be sitting there as my kids are doing rondos looking like, is Cooper Kupp active? Can I play him? Like, hey, everybody, let's practice goal kicks. But just stay the course. Like, don't give up. Like, there's no reason to give up. Be one of those teams that makes the playoffs with 6 wins and then goes on and wins the championship because we're stacking Jameis Winston and Cedric Tillman. Let's do something weird. Let's be the person that picked up Sterling Shepard because you have Baker Mayfield and we went on a winning streak. It's not over. These are the best stories, are the ones that we go and we snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. This is not like American baseball, where it's only the people who spend the most money get the opportunity to win. Fantasy football is the great equalizer, and that anybody can win. Everybody's got an equal chance. The big thing is winning this week. Go out there, win the week, get better, have fun, and you'll be fine.
You can tell you're a coach, can't you? I mean, I felt like I was in the locker room there. I felt like in the locker room. Actually, to further your point, in one of my leagues, I think I'm 4th, 5-2, 5th, 5-2, 6th, 2-5.
Yeah, see? You never know. Yeah, especially if your league's top heavy like that. I've been in a couple of leagues like that too. Just looking around, being like, oh. But the funny thing is in those leagues, I'm always in the upper half. I'm like, oh, I'm 5-2. What am I in? 2nd? Nope, 7th. Because there's two winless teams. You're like, I cannot win.
We'll leave it on that. Adam Rank, thank you very much for joining us on talkSPORT Endzone.
Jay, always a pleasure to see you. Good luck to Will. Maybe we'll see him sometime, but it's always been a pleasure being here with you.
He'll be back someday.